Hey guys, today we're talking all about common food items that cause bloating and what you can do about it. All right, so let's dive right in. Dr. Erez, can you first define what bloating is for us?
It's really not like a clinically defined term, to be honest. But a lot of patients will experience it as sort of like increased discomfort after certain foods or after a meal. It might be accompanied by flatulence or, passing gas, but doesn't always need to be. Sometimes it's the sense of fullness, a sense of rumbling in the stomach. And yeah, so can kind of be defined in multiple ways, but generally it's a uncomfortable feeling that you get a lot of times after eating.
Fantastic. So, all right, let's dive right into what some of those common food ingredients or foods are that might contribute to your bloating, those that you might not even think would actually contribute.
So it's kind of crazy how many people don't realize that some of the ingredients that they're eating on a day-to-day basis are causing their bloating. And it's very specific foods, very specific ingredients, and they just don't know. First one is going to be inulin. And inulin is basically a prebiotic fiber that is in a handful of foods, including Jerusalem artichoke, chicory root. It can also be in several other more common foods. But a lot of times it's used as an additive because it's slightly sweet. It doesn't contain any calories necessarily, but it has a certain sweet flavor to it. And so a lot of times it's added as a filler or a slight sweetener, especially in health food products. It's definitely something that when it gets into the gut, it starts to be fermented by bacteria, a lot of times in the small intestines, but also in the colon. And that process kind of produces gas. And that's what causes the bloating and kind of this discomfort.
And so, inulin in its natural form, it's probably not that problematic because they're not eating too much of it. If you are, you probably will get bloating. But when you're having it in a food product as an additive, it's probably much easier to get higher levels of the inulin that will then cause discomfort. Would you agree?
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, it's in certain foods, in smaller quantities, but when it's a processed food or processed bar, for example, these things can be much more concentrated, and then you get this sudden flood of food for the bacteria in your gut, and you're going to get this sudden bloating. It can be accompanied by diarrhea, discomfort, flatulence. And it might last for several hours. And it might be kind of a little bit hard to predict, how a certain amount of the inulin is going to be experienced person to person. So it is different for different people. Some people are going to probably have a bigger response depending on their specific microbiome.
And what should you do then to identify what level of inulin is okay for you?
So that's a really good question. I think it comes down to paying attention to the foods that you eat and products that might have inulin in them. I'll just give you some examples of foods that recently patients of mine, we've discovered that they're having on a regular basis. So one is a drink called Poppy, and it has about 2 grams of inulin in it. And it's, a health food product. A lot of times it's sold at things, places like Whole Foods or, other health food stores. And it has this ingredient in it. And for a lot of people, that might be too much and cause a significant amount of bloating for people.
And I would imagine, too, with something like Poppy, the fact that you drink it so fast, it's in a liquid form, probably doesn't help the fact that it can cause bloating.
Absolutely. It's a concentrated source. People are getting it all of a sudden. It's easily digestible by bacteria. They don't have to care about fiber or other ingredients. It's just like straight source of
Straight to the gut.
food. Yeah, exactly. So that's absolutely true. Yeah.
And then it's in protein bars and things like that too, commonly.
Yeah, it can be in so many different products. For example, Kind bars, they have chicory root fiber as one of the first ingredients. Atkins bars, for example, depending on the type, Fiber One bars are going to have chicory root, which is like a really concentrated source of inulin. Quest bars, same thing. Think bars, or another one that you might see them in, bulletproof collagen protein bars. So as you can see, like a lot of these quote health food bars and snacks are going to be like chock full of this stuff. Unfortunately, it's also unfortunately like in other foods. And yeah, so like things like garlic, onions, asparagus even have it, in smaller quantities. Bananas, especially if they're slightly kind of unripe, or underripe, I should say. Dandelion greens have them, and it's also in wheat. So even just thinking about whole wheat, there is some inulin, in much smaller quantities, though.
Inulin's not a bad thing in general, right? It's good for your gut to have these prebiotic fibers.
Yeah, I would say in small amounts, it's probably a healthy thing, but it does definitely depend on the person. So people who tend to have an imbalanced microbiome to begin with, they're going to have a worse response to this stuff. And it does depend on what particular bacteria you have, and that are going to like take that food and run with it and just cause more bloating. Some people's nervous system too in their gut is such that it might be a little bit more sensitive to that bloat, to the gas that's produced. So there's a nervous system in our gut that runs a lot of the show down there, and some people's are just set up to be a little bit more sensitive to stretch. And when they feel that stretch, their system's more sensitive, and so they're going to feel that bloating more than other people.
Do you think they should log their food intake and log how they feel? Is that a good way to get an idea of what's going on?
Yeah, a lot of times I'll do like a challenge with people, and that's a really good strategy for figuring out, like what foods are actually causing bloating. So we'll take inulin, or we'll take some of these other things that we're talking about and put them into like a concentrated, either a capsule, or we'll eat certain foods that I know are really high in them, and we'll try to actually distinguish like which of these specific things they should be avoiding or they're sensitive to. And it can be really, really powerful way to figure out what's underlying the bloating stuff.
Is it a good idea to then build up to a certain amount of these prebiotics or plant foods in general? Would you recommend, if someone's not used to eating a ton of plants or fibers, prebiotic fibers, they should build up to it?
Yeah, that's really, really important to slowly build up to it. And there may also just be some people who do not tolerate inulin. No matter how slowly you do it, they're just going to be bloated. And part of that may stem from people who, again, have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Those people tend to really, really be sensitive to inulin. So that might be another trigger, is if we find out that you're sensitive to inulin, that we might do some follow-up testing to see what your microbiome is like.
Yeah, and address that root cause, so then maybe one day you can comfortably ingest a Kind bar or the higher levels of inulin.
Correct.
What else did you want to talk about other than inulin?
I think there's a lot of other, ingredients that tend to be big ones for people that cause bloating that they might not really be aware of. And, I guess what we can talk about is sorbitol, and even erythritol. So sorbitol is a natural sort of sugar alcohol that is found in fruits and vegetables, and also is sometimes used as a natural sweetener, although erythritol is probably more commonly used as a sweetener you might see. And sorbitol is in lots and lots of in particular fruits. So, and people may not know this, but things like apples and pears and prunes and plums especially have a really, really high level of sorbitol. And what sorbitol does is it draws water into the gut, and it also is going to trigger gut bacteria to sort of produce a lot of gas. So, for example, prunes, most people are aware of, eating prunes is going to maybe help you out with constipation, but it's also probably going to give you a little bit of gas as well. And that's pretty commonly known, but people may not know that there's a smaller amount of sorbitol in apples and pear and other stone fruits.
Yeah, I feel like we all have looked in our grandparents' pantry and seen some prunes.
Yeah, it works pretty well. This is another reason why, when people are dealing with that constipation, sometimes people do recommend things like apples and pears. Like, for example, if a little small child is having issues with constipation, a lot of times like pears and applesauce are like the go-to, and that's kind of the reason is there's this little bit of sorbitol in there that's can be a good thing for some people and be really problematic for others.
Interesting. So inulin and sorbitol and erythritol is a more common one. I have a bag of erythritol in my pantry at home that we use sometimes, but I got to be careful. Don't want to use too much.
Yeah. I mean, and erythritol is probably in the most amount of products that you'll see out there. Again, it's just a natural kind of non-sugar sort of sweetener, and it's a sugar alcohol that doesn't raise your blood sugar like regular sugar would. And it's used in tons of like keto products. Think like keto ice cream, keto bars, any kind of like keto snack, or any low carb product, Atkins type products as well. So
Yep, for sure. I've definitely seen them in those types of foods.
Yeah.
So we have inulin, sorbitol, erythritol, those types of sugar alcohols. Are there other food ingredients, food products that really contribute to bloating and people have issues with?
Yeah. So another one is going to be raffinose. And, it's in a lot of things that you classically think of as causing bloating. But it can be in some other things that you might not kind of correlate with bloating. So think beans, lentils, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage. And the reason this is so problematic is because it's kind of a complex sugar. It's an oligosaccharide. And a lot of people lack the enzyme to be able to digest this in high quantities. So it actually ends up fermenting in the colon. It produces gas, and it's a really, really common issue for people. And a lot of people know this, like they have like beans and they feel super, super bloated and gassy, but they may not know why. And then that's one of the reasons that they might be bloated.
Yeah, and I can imagine with people, especially us in America, we eat a standard American diet. We want to eat healthier. We are super motivated. We go and we get all the vegetables and the healthy bars and the things like that. Then we probably eat more than our digestive system can handle. We feel discomfort, and then we're probably, upset and frustrated with the fact that we're trying to eat healthy, but yet we're now in discomfort and pain. I think that's a common thing that a lot of people go through. And so it's really important to understand what some of these causes might be and what you can do to, like we said, ease into eating these foods so that your microbiome can kind of catch up.
Yeah, no, really well said, honestly. And, again, in like smaller amounts, these things can be really, really healthy. And a lot of these foods, in particular, like beans, lentils, and cruciferous vegetables are super, super healthy. But eating them in smaller amounts and kind of easing your way into it is really important for a lot of people. And in particular with raffinose, you can take enzymes to help you break those things down. So that is something that I do with patients. Hey, if we figure out, hey, you're really, really sensitive to raffinose or some of the other, things that are in beans, then we'll actually give you a particular enzyme complex that helps break down the raffinose. And a lot of people get benefit from that.
That's super cool. So there are things you can do to help with the digestive process.
Yeah. Yep.
Love it. What else do you want to touch on?
Yeah, the last one is maybe more of an obvious trigger for a lot of people, but you'd be surprised at how many people forget about this, and it's lactose. So lactose is obviously the sugar molecule that's in milk. It comes in dairy products, and a lot of people are just deficient in lactase, the enzyme that can kind of help digest lactose. And same thing, it leads to gas, bloating, diarrhea anytime they consume dairy products, you know, and it's very, very common. There's certain populations that are much more likely to be lactose intolerant, and it does come down to some degree to genetics, but it also comes down to your microbiome, and there's certain microbiome that will help people digest lactose a little bit better. There's certain types of infections that can cause lactose intolerance. In particular, people that have had, let's say, a norovirus or other really aggressive, like, viruses that cause stomach flus and stomach bugs, will eventually lead to lactose intolerance for a period of time, because the little villi that produce lactase, the enzyme, sometimes get kind of die off over time with an illness like that. So
Inflammation would then cause issues. Is that what you're saying? So if you have inflammation or problems with your microbiome, maybe through an illness or a virus, then that could impact. Maybe before that illness, you were able to tolerate these things, but after the fact, you struggle.
yeah, so people who have had, let's say, a recent gastroenteritis, a viral gastroenteritis, there's various specific viruses that can cause this. They may be lactose intolerant even when they weren't, and that might last a year or 6 months or a certain period of time until that production of lactase enzyme improves. Yeah.
Is it really just time? Do you need to just take time for your microvilli and your digestive system to heal?
Yeah, so the microvilli are really, really important, and it can take time. There are certain things that we can do to kind of improve that process. So, yeah,
to speed it up. Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me what the steps are then for someone who's struggling with bloating. What should they do first?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should become familiar with like these things that we mentioned. So inulin, sorbitol, erythritol, raffinose, lactose, and start thinking about what they're eating and looking at the ingredient list. That's really, really important. And it's unbelievable how many people I talk to have no idea that they're ingesting this on a regular basis, and that one of their main complaints is bloating, and they take some of these ingredients out, and they're feeling so much better. So yeah, just become familiar with those ingredients, look at the ingredient list, things like chicory root, things like inulin, sorbitol, erythritol, raffinose, and lactose.
And what would you do next? Would you then have them go through a more specific testing if they take these items out and it doesn't make much of an improvement? They're not sure exactly what's causing it. Would you go into that specific testing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's where a little bit more of an in-depth, like comprehensive look at their microbiome. There are many more ingredients that can cause bloating, so we would want to talk about, the 10 or 20 other ones that we didn't have time to go through today. But I think a more in-depth workup with a functional medicine doctor, comprehensive testing of the gut and the gut microbiome is probably the next step.
I love it. Awesome. And lastly, would you then, after you remove the cause of the issue, would you do certain things to help heal them and get them back to baseline?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of times we're going to be talking about gut healing nutrients, talking about, what specific probiotics can help balance people out a little bit more and fill in some of the gaps that they might have in their microbiome. We're going to be talking about, certain foods that they should increase in their diet to make them feel better long term and help kind of support their gut function. So there's tons of things that we can do to sort of like get them back from the precipice of, that like feeling bloated all the time. And just like, man, people complain to me like they can't socialize, they have trouble at work, they have to run to the bathroom, they have to excuse themselves like in the middle of a conversation. It's terrible. So yeah, getting to the bottom of this stuff can really make a big difference. It can also like impact people's sleep. They're in the middle of trying to sleep and they just feel so bloated that they can't actually get good sleep. So yeah, it can be really problematic. And, I think in the long run, if people look into some of these ingredients and work with somebody to try to like come up with a program for them, they can get to the bottom of what's causing it.
Well said. Perfectly said. Is there any last things you want to discuss before I let you go?
No. Yeah, I think that's it. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful and, people can kind of figure out some of what's causing their bloating.